Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge headfirst into fascinating topics, and you get to be right there with us.
Sounds fun.
Today, we're taking on the granddaddy of big questions. Metaphysics.
Ooh, that's a big one.
I'm Harry, your host for this mind-bending adventure, and to kick things off, why don't we lighten the mood with a little metaphysical humor?
Okay, I like where this is going.
What do you get when you cross a philosopher with a computer scientist?
I don't know. An algorithm that can argue about whether it exists. I should have seen that coming.
Very clever.
I'm Kimi, and I'm thrilled to join you on this deep dive into a subject that has captivated thinkers for centuries.
It's a doozy.
Metaphysics, in the simplest terms, is the study of the ultimate nature of reality.
It sounds pretty daunting, but you know me, I love a good challenge, and I have a feeling our listener does too. So let's start unpacking this, shall we?
Sure.
What exactly does it mean to study the ultimate nature of reality? Are we talking about things that physics just can't explain?
You're on the right track. One way to think about it is that while physics explores the how of the universe, how things move, interact, and change, metaphysics delves into the why.
The why.
Why does anything exist at all? What are the fundamental building blocks of reality? And what is the nature of existence itself?
That's a lot to unpack.
The term itself is a bit of a clue. It comes from the Greek ta metaphysica, meaning what comes after the physics, suggesting that these questions go beyond the realm of empirical observation.
So it's like we're going behind the scenes of the universe, peeking into the control room where all the big levers are. That's a pretty exciting prospect, wouldn't we say?
Absolutely. And it's a journey that takes us through some fascinating territory. We'll be exploring concepts like being, existence, objects, properties, time, space, and even the mind-body problem.
Wow.
It's a vast and intricate web of interconnected ideas, and one that has evolved over centuries of philosophical inquiry.
I'm ready to dive in, but maybe we should start with a map of the terrain.
Good idea.
What are some of the key concepts or questions that we'll be wrestling with in this deep dive?
One fundamental concept is that of categories of being. How do we classify the different kinds of things that exist in the world? You might be surprised to learn that this isn't just a philosophical exercise. It has real-world implications influencing how we organize knowledge, design databases, and even understand the structure of language.
You mean like how we categorize things as living or non-living, abstract or concrete?
Exactly.
It sounds like a way of making sense of the sheer diversity of existence, kind of like organizing a giant cosmic library.
Exactly. Think about Aristotle, one of the foundational figures in metaphysics. He came up with a system of 10 categories, including substance, quantity, quality, relation, and more.
I vaguely remember learning about this.
And these categories, believe it or not, still influence how we think about the world today.
That's amazing to think that ideas from thousands of years ago are still relevant today. It shows how deep these questions go. But you mentioned something else, the mind-body problem, and that one really piques my curiosity.
The mind-body problem grapples with the relationship between our mental experiences, thoughts, feelings, consciousness, and the physical reality of our brains and bodies.
Okay.
How do these two seemingly distinct realms interact? Is the mind simply a product of the brain, or is there something more to it?
It's like asking if our thoughts are just electrical impulses or if there's some kind of mind stuff that exists independently of the physical world. It's a question that has huge implications for how we understand ourselves and our place in the universe.
Precisely. And it's just one of many profound questions that we'll be exploring in this deep dive.
I can't wait.
But before we go too far down the rabbit hole, I think it's worth acknowledging that metaphysics has its share of critics, those who question its value and even its legitimacy as a field of inquiry.
Really? Why?
I'll tell you all about it. Yeah, some people think it's all just armchair speculation.
Oh, really?
Detached from the real world, lacking the rigor of empirical science.
I can see that.
Like, why bother pondering the unknowable when there's so much we can observe and measure right in front of us?
Yeah, why bother?
Yeah.
I guess if we can't prove or disprove these metaphysical claims through experiments or observations, how can we ever know if we're getting any closer to the truth?
Yeah, it's tempting to just dismiss it all as a philosophical rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But despite these criticisms, metaphysics has a certain allure that keeps drawing us back. This persistent curiosity about the underlying nature of reality.
That's true.
That refuses to be silenced.
So how do we reconcile these opposing views?
Well,
I mean, is there a way to bridge the gap between this abstract world of metaphysics and the concrete world of our everyday experience?
I think so.
It would be a shame to abandon these big questions altogether.
Oh, absolutely.
It would.
I think one way to approach this is to recognize that metaphysics isn't necessarily about finding definitive answers,
Okay.
but rather about asking the right questions.
The right question.
The kind of questions that push the boundaries of our understanding and challenge us to think deeply about the world around us.
I see.
It's about cultivating a sense of wonder and intellectual humility in the face of the unknown.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's not about claiming to have all the answers,
No.
but about embracing the mystery and recognizing that there's always more to learn. But how does this translate into something practical?
Yeah.
That's something that has relevance beyond the realm of philosophical debate. Our listeners are wondering about that too.
I think the key lies in understanding how metaphysics connects to other fields of knowledge, serving as a kind of conceptual foundation for our understanding of the world.
Okay.
For example, you might not realize it, but many scientific concepts like space-time causality and even the laws of nature themselves have their roots in metaphysical assumptions about the nature of reality.
So you're saying that even scientists who pride themselves on empirical observation are implicitly relying on metaphysical frameworks to make sense of their findings. That's fascinating. And it makes me wonder, how far does this influence extend?
Well, think about the social sciences fields like sociology, psychology, economics. They're all dealing with concepts like human behavior, social structures, and systems of belief.
Oh.
Metaphysics can help us understand whether these are merely human constructs or whether they reflect some deeper underlying reality. It's about questioning the very nature of what we consider real and how we come to know it.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
That's a good one.
We start with our everyday experience, then we delve into the scientific explanations, and then metaphysics takes us even deeper, questioning the very assumptions that underlie those explanations.
Yeah.
It's enough to make your head spin. Speaking of mind-bending concepts, there's one that I think we should explore in more detail.
Okay, what's that?
The idea of possible worlds, which you briefly mentioned earlier.
Oh, yeah, possible worlds.
I remember reading about that in the source material.
It's a good one.
It sounded like something out of science fiction, a way of imagining alternative realities where things could have turned out differently.
Yeah.
But how does this fit into the grand scheme of metaphysics? Is it just a philosophical thought experiment, or is there something more to it?
Well, it's certainly a fascinating thought experiment. Imagine a world where dinosaurs never went extinct, or where you made different choices in your life leading you down a completely different path.
Okay.
But possible worlds are more than just flights of fancy.
Okay.
They're a powerful tool that metaphysicians use to analyze modal statements about what could be or must be the case.
So you're saying that possible worlds help us explore the realm of possibilities and necessities, the things that could have been and the things that are inherently true regardless of the circumstance.
Exactly.
That's a pretty mind-blowing concept, and I'm curious to know, what are some of the implications of this way of thinking?
That's a great question, and it leads us into some really deep philosophical waters. One implication is that it challenges our notion of what makes our own world the world we experience, the actual world. Is it just one among many possible worlds, or is there something special about it that sets it apart?
It makes you wonder if there's some kind of cosmic lottery going on with countless possible worlds spinning out of existence, and we just happen to be inhabiting this particular one.
That's one way to think about it.
It's a dizzying thought.
It is.
But before we get lost in the multiverse, perhaps we should bring it back down to Earth and explore some of the more grounded aspects of metaphysics. How about those criticisms we were discussing earlier?
Yeah, so as we were saying, some critics argue that metaphysics is too abstract, too detached from the real world to have any practical value.
Okay.
They might say that it's all well and good to ponder the nature of reality, but what does that really tell us about how to live our lives or solve the problems we face?
Yeah, it's like they're saying, why waste time debating the existence of free will when there are wars to be stopped and diseases to be cured? I can see their point, but I also feel like there's something valuable in stepping back from the immediacy of our problems and asking these bigger questions.
Yeah.
It's about gaining perspective, would you say?
Absolutely. I think one way to address this criticism is to recognize that metaphysics isn't meant to be a replacement for other fields of knowledge, but rather a complement to them.
Okay.
It's about providing a deeper understanding of the foundations on which those other fields are built,
I see.
helping us to see the connections between seemingly disparate areas of knowledge.
So it's not about choosing between metaphysics and science, or between philosophy and practical action,
Right.
but rather about seeing how these different ways of knowing can inform and enrich each other.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that the pursuit of knowledge is a multifaceted endeavor, with each discipline contributing to a richer understanding of the whole.
And, speaking of different ways of knowing, I think it's worth mentioning another major criticism of metaphysics, one that comes from the empiricist tradition in philosophy. Empiricists like David Hume argue that all knowledge ultimately derives from sensory experience, from what we can observe and measure in the world around us.
So they would say that metaphysical claims, which often deal with concepts that are beyond the reach of our senses, are essentially meaningless because they can't be verified or falsified through empirical observation.
Yeah, it's like they're saying if you can't see it, touch it, or measure it, it's not worth talking about.
It's a good point.
But it's not quite that simple. Empiricists aren't necessarily denying the existence of things that lie beyond our immediate perception, but they are questioning our ability to gain knowledge of those things through purely rational means.
I see.
They might argue that metaphysical speculation without the grounding of empirical evidence is prone to error and can lead us astray.
So it's a cautionary tale about the limits of human reason and the importance of anchoring our beliefs in something tangible, something we can verify through our senses. It's a reminder that even the most brilliant minds can be led astray by their own biases and assumptions.
Precisely. And this brings us to another important figure in the history of metaphysics, Immanuel Kant, who attempted to reconcile the rationalist and empiricist traditions by proposing a kind of compromise. He argued that while we can't have knowledge of things as they are in themselves, what he called the noumenal realm, we can still have knowledge of things as they appear to us, the phenomenal realm.
So he's saying that our knowledge is limited to the realm of possible experience to the world, as it is filtered through our senses and structured by our minds. It's like saying that we can only know the shadow of reality, not reality itself.
That's a great analogy. Kant believed that our minds play an active role in shaping our experience of the world, imposing categories like space-time and causality onto the raw data of our senses. He argued that these categories are not inherent in the world itself, but are rather a priori, meaning that they exist independently of our experience.
So it's like saying that our minds are not just passive receivers of information, but active constructors of reality, shaping the world we perceive through the lens of our own cognitive frameworks.
Exactly.
That's a pretty revolutionary idea, and it makes me wonder if our minds are so integral to our experience of the world, does that mean that there's no such thing as objective truth?
That's a question that has plagued philosophers for centuries and one that we could spend hours unpacking. But I think for our purposes today, the key takeaway is that Kant's work highlights the complex interplay between our minds and the world, between what we can know and what remains forever beyond our grasp.
It's a humbling reminder that even in our quest for knowledge, we are bound by the limitations of our own perspective, our own cognitive apparatus. But that doesn't mean we should give up the pursuit altogether. It just means we need to be aware of our own biases and limitations as we navigate the complex terrain of metaphysics.
Well said. And, speaking of navigating complex terrain, I think it's time we turned our attention to another fascinating aspect of metaphysics, one that deals with the very fabric of reality itself, the concepts of space and time.
Space and time, those fundamental dimensions that we all experience but rarely stop to think about, they seem so intuitive, so ingrained in our understanding of the world, yet when you start to really examine them, they become incredibly slippery concepts, don't they?
You've hit the nail on the head. Harry, space and time are so fundamental to our experience that we often take them for granted, but when you start to peel back the layers, you realize that there's a whole world of philosophical debate about their nature and how they relate to reality. It's almost as if they're the stage on which the drama of existence unfolds, but what is the nature of that stage itself?
Well, I remember from the source material that there are different views on whether space and time are absolute or relational. Can you unpack those concepts for us? It's like asking whether the stage is fixed and unchanging or whether it's somehow shaped by the actors in the play itself.
That's a great analogy. Space-time absolutism, championed by figures like Isaac Newton, sees space and time as independent entities existing in their own right, regardless of whether there's anything in them. Think of it as a kind of cosmic container, a pre-existing framework that provides the backdrop for all physical events.
So in this view, space and time are like a giant empty grid with all the stars and planets and galaxies scattered across it. And this grid exists even if we were to magically remove all the matter and energy from the universe. It's a pretty mind-boggling concept.
It is. But there's another view, space-time relationism, which takes a different approach, arguing that space and time are not independent entities, but rather a network of relationships between objects. In this view, space is defined by the distances between things, and time is defined by the sequence of events.
So instead of a pre-existing grid space and time, emerge from the interactions between things, kind of like a cosmic dance, where the dancers create the dance floor as they move. That's a pretty radical departure from the absolutist view.
It is, and it has some interesting implications. For example, if there were no objects in the universe, there would be no space or time because there would be nothing to relate to. It's a view that challenges our intuitive understanding of these fundamental dimensions.
It's enough to make your head spin. But, speaking of things that make your head spin, the source material also mentions something about the flow of time. Is time a river flowing from past to present to future, or is it something else entirely? I always get a bit lost in those discussions.
It's one of the most perplexing questions in metaphysics, the nature of time, and whether it really flows in the way we perceive it. One way to think about it is through the distinction between the A-series and B-series theories of time. The A-series sees time as dynamic, flowing from past to present to future, with each moment having a unique position in this flow.
So in the A-series view, the past is gone, the future is yet to come, and the present is this fleeting moment that's constantly slipping away. It's kind of a melancholic view, isn't it, with time always marching on regardless of our wishes.
It can be seen that way, but the B-series offers a different perspective, seeing time as static, like a vast, unchanging landscape, with all moments existing simultaneously, just in different positions relative to each other. Think of it like a film strip where all the frames exist at once, but we only experience them one at a time as the projector runs.
So in the B-series view, the past, present, and future all exist at the same time, but our consciousness is like a spotlight moving along the film strip, illuminating each moment as it passes. That's a pretty mind-bending concept, and it makes me wonder if it opens the door to things like time travel, where we could somehow jump to a different point on the film strip.
It's a fascinating question, and one that physicists and philosophers are still debating. The B-series view certainly doesn't rule out the possibility of time travel, but it does challenge our traditional understanding of what it would mean to travel through time.
It's enough to make your head spin. But, as fascinating as these concepts are, I'm curious to know how they connect to our everyday experience. What difference does it make whether we see time as flowing or static, or whether we believe in space-time absolutism or relationism?
That's a great question, Harry, and one that I think gets to the heart of why metaphysics matters. While these concepts may seem abstract and removed from our daily lives, they have profound implications for how we understand ourselves and our place in the universe.
So it's not just about philosophical hair-splitting, it's about grappling with fundamental questions about the nature of reality and how we fit into the grand scheme of things. It's about expanding our horizons and challenging our assumptions about the world.
Exactly. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's worth reiterating that metaphysics isn't about finding definitive answers, but rather about asking the right questions, the kind of questions that push the boundaries of our understanding and inspire us to keep exploring the mysteries of existence.
Well said. And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and left you with a sense of wonder about the world around you. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.